The shovel bit into the hard Texas earth with a sound that echoed across the empty prairie. And Caroline Carter knew that every strike was both an ending and something she could not yet name. It was late September in 1883, and the sun beat down mercilessly on the outskirts of Columbus, a small town that sat like a dusty jewel in Colorado County. Caroline had traveled 3 weeks to reach this God-forsaken place, her husband's body wrapped in canvas and strapped to the back of their wagon. The undertaker in the last town had offered to help, but she had no money left for such luxuries. Thomas had wanted to be buried in Texas, near where he was born, and Caroline would honor that wish even if it killed her. She was 24 years old, though she felt ancient. Her dark hair hung in a braid down her back, and her calico dress was stained with dust and sweat. Her hands, once soft and pale, were now blistered and raw. The shovel was heavy, far heavier than anything she had ever lifted back in Missouri, and the hole she was digging was nowhere near deep enough. "Madam, that is not going to work." Caroline spun around, nearly dropping the shovel. A man stood about 10 feet away, his hat in his hands. He was tall and lean, with sun-darkened skin and eyes the color of whiskey. He looked to be in his late 20s, with the kind of face that suggested he smiled often, though at the moment his expression was serious and concerned. "I did not hear you approach," Caroline said, her voice hoarse from days of crying and even more days of silence. "I apologize for startling you. My name is Wyatt James. I have a ranch about 2 miles north of here." He gestured vaguely behind him. "I was riding the fence line when I saw you out here. This is not exactly a safe place for a woman alone." "I am managing just fine," Caroline said, though they both knew it was a lie. The hole was barely 2 feet deep, and she had been digging for over an hour. Wyatt looked past her to the wagon where the canvas-wrapped form lay in the bed. His expression softened. "I am very sorry for your loss. Was he your husband?" Caroline nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. "How long have you been traveling?" 3 weeks. "We left Missouri at the end of August. Thomas wanted to come home. He was sick, consumption, and he said he wanted to see Texas one more time before he died." She paused, staring down at her blistered hands. "He died 4 days outside of San Antonio. I have been traveling with him ever since, trying to get here." Wyatt's face showed genuine compassion. "That must have been incredibly difficult. Where are his people, his family?" "Dead. His parents died years ago and he had no siblings. There is just me." Caroline turned back to the hole and lifted the shovel again. "And I need to finish this before dark. Madam, please." Wyatt stepped forward, his hand outstretched. "Let me help you. That ground is hard as rock and you are going to hurt yourself." Pride warred with exhaustion in Caroline's chest. She wanted to tell him she could do it herself, that she did not need charity from a stranger. But the truth was that she did need help. She had been trying to do everything alone for so long, and she was so very tired. "I do not have money to pay you," she said quietly. "I am not asking for payment. I am offering to help because it is the right thing to do." He held out his hand for the shovel. "Please." Caroline hesitated for only a moment before handing it over. The relief in her shoulders was immediate, and she realized just how much pain she had been in. Wyatt removed his jacket and rolled up his sleeves. His arms were strong and muscled from years of ranch work, and he made quick progress where Caroline had struggled. She watched him work, noting the efficiency of his movements and the respectful silence he maintained. He did not ask questions or make small talk. He just dug steady and sure until the hole was deep enough and wide enough to serve as a proper grave. When he finally climbed out, his shirt was soaked with sweat and his hands were covered in dirt. "Do you need help moving him?" he asked gently. Together, they lifted Thomas's body from the wagon. He had been a small man, made even smaller by the illness that had ravaged him, and even wrapped in canvas, he felt impossibly light. They lowered him carefully into the ground, and Caroline stood at the edge of the grave, staring down at the shape of the man she had married 5 years ago. "Would you like to say some words?" Wyatt asked. Caroline's throat was tight. Thomas Carter was a good man. He was kind and gentle, and he loved music. He played the fiddle, though not very well. A small, sad smile crossed her face. "He made me laugh, even when times were hard. He deserved better than this, better than dying so young, so far from home. But he is home now, and I hope he has found peace." Her voice broke on the last word, and she felt tears streaming down her face. She had cried so much over the past weeks that she thought she had no tears left, but apparently she had been wrong. Wyatt bowed his head respectfully and remained silent until Caroline had composed herself. Then, without a word, he picked up the shovel and began filling in the grave. Caroline helped, using her hands to push dirt into the hole when the shovel was not in use. It was dirty, physical work, but it felt right somehow, like a final act of love and service. When the grave was filled and mounded, Wyatt gathered several large stones from the surrounding area and arranged them in a border around the site. "Do you have something to mark it with?" he asked. Caroline shook her head. "I had planned to carve something into a piece of wood, but I have not had the strength. I can make a proper marker for you. I have tools back at the ranch. I can bring it out tomorrow and set it up." "You have already done so much," Caroline protested, "and I am offering to do a little more." Wyatt's voice was firm but kind. "No man should have an unmarked grave, and no woman should have to carry this burden alone." Caroline looked at him, really looked at him for the first time. There was something in his eyes, a deep well of empathy that suggested he understood loss in a way that only someone who had experienced it could. "Thank you," she whispered. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Wyatt glanced at the horizon and then back at Caroline. "Where are you planning to stay tonight?" "I will sleep in the wagon. I have been doing so for weeks." "That is not safe out here. There are wild animals, and worse, there are men who would take advantage of a woman alone." He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "I have a bunkhouse on my property that is empty right now. My ranch hands are out on a cattle drive and will not be back for another 2 weeks. You are welcome to stay there. It is clean and secure, and you would have privacy." Every instinct in Caroline's body screamed that she should refuse. She did not know this man, and accepting his hospitality felt dangerous in ways she could not articulate. But she was also exhausted, hungry, and scared. The thought of spending another night alone in the wagon, listening to every sound and wondering if it was a threat, was almost more than she could bear. "I do not want to impose," she said weakly. "You would not be. Honestly, it would make me feel better knowing you are safe. I can come back for the wagon tomorrow when I bring the marker." He must have seen the hesitation in her eyes because he added, "You have my word as a gentleman that you will be treated with nothing but respect." Caroline made her decision. "All right, thank you." Wyatt helped her gather her few belongings from the wagon, including a carpet bag with her clothes and a small box containing the few precious items she had left. Photographs and letters mostly. He had a horse tied nearby, a sturdy bay mare, and he loaded Caroline's things onto the saddle before helping her mount. She had ridden plenty of times before, but never behind a man, and the intimacy of it made her blush despite her grief. The ride to Wyatt's ranch took about 20 minutes, and as they crested a small hill, Caroline saw the property spread out before them. It was larger than she had expected, with a main house, a barn, several outbuildings, and what she assumed was the bunkhouse. Everything was well maintained, and there were fences stretching as far as the eye could see. "You have a beautiful place," Caroline said. "Thank you. I have been working on it for about 6 years now. It is not much compared to some of the big ranches, but it is mine and I am proud of it." He rode directly to the bunkhouse, a long, low building with a covered porch. Inside, it was simple but clean, with 6 beds lined up against the walls, a pot-bellied stove in the corner, and a table with chairs. Wyatt showed her to the bed nearest the stove and set her bag down on the mattress. "The linens are clean. I washed them before the men left. There is a pump out back for water and the privy is about 30 yards that way." He pointed out the window. "I will bring you some food in a little bit. Do you have any dietary restrictions?" Caroline almost laughed at the absurdity of the question. She had been living on hardtack and jerky for weeks. "No, anything would be wonderful." Wyatt nodded and headed for the door, then paused. "I know today was difficult, and I know you do not know me. But I want you to know that you are safe here. If you need anything at all, the main house is right there. Do not hesitate to come get me." After he left, Caroline sat down on the bed and let out a long, shaky breath. The mattress was thin and the pillow was flat, but after weeks of sleeping on the hard wagon bed, it felt like luxury. She laid back and stared at the ceiling, her mind spinning with everything that had happened. She had buried her husband. A stranger had helped her. And now she was on that stranger's ranch, dependent on his kindness and goodwill. It was all so surreal that she almost could not process it. Just 2 months ago, she had been in Missouri, caring for Thomas as he slowly wasted away. She had known the end was coming, had prepared herself as best she could, but nothing could have truly prepared her for the reality of it. And then, his dying wish to be buried in Texas had set her on this strange journey, one that had led her to this moment. A soft knock on the door pulled her from her thoughts. "Come in," she called. Wyatt entered carrying a tray laden with food. There was a thick slice of bread, a bowl of stew, a glass of milk, and a piece of apple pie. The smell alone made Caroline's mouth water. "I was not sure what you would like, so I made a little of everything," Wyatt said, setting the tray on the table. "The stew is beef and vegetables, and the pie was actually made by my neighbor, Mrs. Henderson. She brings me baked goods sometimes because she thinks I am wasting away." Caroline stood and moved to the table, her stomach growling audibly. "This looks incredible. Thank you so much. You are very welcome. Take your time and eat as much as you want. I will come by in the morning to check on you." He tipped his hat and left, closing the door softly behind him. Caroline did not wait. She sat down and began to eat, and it was the best meal she had had in months. The stew was rich and flavorful, the bread was fresh and warm, and the pie was sweet and perfect. She ate every bite, barely pausing to breathe, and when she was done, she felt more human than she had in weeks. After she finished, she washed her face and hands with water from a basin Wyatt had thoughtfully provided, changed into a clean nightgown, and climbed into bed. The moment her head hit the pillow, exhaustion crashed over her like a wave, and she was asleep within seconds. She dreamed of Thomas, of the early days of their marriage when they had been happy and full of hope. In the dream, he was healthy and whole, and they were dancing in their small parlor in Missouri, his fiddle playing softly in the background. When she woke, her face was wet with tears, and the early morning light was streaming through the window. For a moment, she did not remember where she was. Then it all came rushing back. Texas, Columbus, Wyatt James, the grave. She sat up slowly, her body aching from the previous day's exertion. Outside, she could hear the sounds of the ranch coming to life, the lowing of cattle, the clucking of chickens, the whinny of horses. It was a peaceful sound, comforting in its normalcy. There was another knock on the door. "Caroline, are you awake?" It was Wyatt's voice. "Yes, come in." He entered carrying another tray, this one with breakfast. There were eggs, bacon, biscuits, and coffee. "Good morning. I hope you slept well." "I did, thank you. Better than I have in a long time." Wyatt set the tray down and took a seat across from her. He looked freshly washed and shaved, and he smelled faintly of soap and leather. "I wanted to talk to you about your plans. I know you probably want to head back to Missouri eventually, but I was thinking you might want to stay here for a few days, rest up, regain your strength. The journey you have been on has taken a toll, and you should take care of yourself before you head out again." Caroline had not even thought about what came next. The entire focus of the past few weeks had been getting Thomas to Texas and burying him. Now that it was done, she felt oddly adrift, like a ship without a rudder. "I do not know what I am going to do," she admitted. "I have nothing waiting for me in Missouri. Thomas and I were renting a small house, and I am sure the landlord has already rented it to someone else. I have no family, no job, no prospects. I suppose I will have to figure something out, but I have not gotten that far in my thinking." Wyatt leaned forward, his expression earnest. "What if you stayed here? In Columbus, I mean. There is always work for someone willing to do it, and the town could use more good people. You could start fresh, build a new life. I do not know anyone here." "You know me," Wyatt said with a small smile, "and I am happy to introduce you to others. Mrs. Henderson, the woman who made that pie, runs a boarding house in town. I am sure she would be happy to rent you a room, and she might even know of job opportunities. The school teacher is getting married next month and moving to San Antonio, so they will need someone to take over the school. Can you read and write?" "Yes, of course. I actually taught school for a year before I married Thomas." "Then there you go. You could apply for the position. The pay is not much, but it is steady, and teaching is respectable work." Caroline felt a flicker of something she had not felt in a long time, hope maybe, or at least the possibility of it. The idea of staying in Texas, of building a new life in a place where no one knew her as Thomas Carter's widow, was oddly appealing. She could be just Caroline here, whoever she decided that was. "I will think about it," she said carefully. "That is all I ask." Wyatt stood. "In the meantime, eat your breakfast and take it easy today. I am going to go out to the grave site and put up the marker I made. I will bring your wagon back while I am at it. If you want to come with me, you are welcome to, but you do not have to." Caroline considered it. She did want to see the marker to make sure Thomas's grave was properly marked, but she also was not sure she had the emotional strength to go back there so soon. "I think I will stay here if that is all right. Of course, I will be back in a few hours." After he left, Caroline ate her breakfast slowly, savoring every bite. The coffee was strong and hot, exactly what she needed. When she was done, she washed the dishes in a basin and then took the opportunity to properly bathe using the pump out back and a bar of soap she found in her bag. The water was cold, but it felt good to wash away the grime and sweat of the past weeks. She dressed in her one good dress, a simple navy blue frock that was a bit worn but still presentable. She brushed out her hair and rebraided it, and when she looked at her reflection in the small mirror hanging on the wall, she was surprised to see that she looked almost like herself again. Wyatt returned in the early afternoon, driving her wagon. He pulled up to the bunkhouse and hopped down, a satisfied expression on his face. "The marker is up. I think you will be pleased with it." "What does it say?" Caroline asked. "Thomas Carter, beloved husband, 1855 to 1883, home at last." Tears stung Caroline's eyes, but they were not entirely sad tears. There was gratitude mixed in and relief. "Thank you. That is perfect. I am glad you like it." Wyatt tied the wagon to a post and turned to her. "I was thinking if you are feeling up to it, I could take you into town tomorrow." You could meet Mrs. Henderson and maybe talk to the school board about the teaching position. It would give you a chance to see Columbus, get a feel for the place. Caroline hesitated. Part of her wanted to stay hidden away on the ranch, safe from the world and its judgments. But another part of her, the stronger part, knew that she could not hide forever. She had to move forward, had to start building whatever came next. "All right," she said. "I will go." Wyatt's face lit up with a genuine smile, and Caroline realized it was the first real smile she had seen from him. It transformed his face, making him look younger and more carefree. "Great. We will leave first thing in the morning. In the meantime, why do not you take a walk around the ranch? Get some fresh air and stretch your legs. You have been cooped up for too long." Caroline took his advice and spent the rest of the afternoon exploring the property. The ranch was beautiful in a stark, rugged way. The land stretched out in all directions, covered in tough prairie grass and dotted with mesquite trees. Cattle grazed in the distance, and she could see a few horses in a corral near the barn. She wandered over to the horses and stood at the fence, watching them. One of them, a dappled gray mare, came over to investigate her. Caroline stroked her soft nose, feeling a sense of peace settle over her. "That is Clover. She is a sweetheart." Caroline turned to see Wyatt approaching. He leaned on the fence beside her, his eyes on the horses. "She is beautiful," Caroline said. "She is also very gentle. If you wanted to go for a ride sometime, she would be perfect for you." "I have not ridden in a while. Thomas and I could not afford to keep a horse." "Well, you are welcome to ride any time you want while you are here. It is good for the soul, I think, being out on the range with nothing but the wind and the sky." They stood in comfortable silence for a few minutes, watching the horses. Caroline found herself stealing glances at Wyatt, taking in the strong line of his jaw and the way his hair curled slightly at the nape of his neck. He was a handsome man, there was no denying that, but more than that, he was kind. And kindness, Caroline was learning, was rarer and more valuable than good looks. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Of course." "Why are you helping me? You do not know me, I could be anyone." Wyatt was quiet for a moment, his expression thoughtful. "A few years ago, I lost someone very important to me. My younger sister, Lillian. She was only 18 and she died from a fever. I was not there when it happened. I was out on a cattle drive, and by the time I got back, she had already been buried. I never got to say goodbye, never got to make sure she had a proper resting place." His voice was thick with emotion, and Caroline felt her heart ache for him. "I think," he continued, "that when I saw you out there digging that grave all alone, it brought everything back. I thought about Lillian and how I would have wanted someone to help her if she had needed it. I guess I am helping you because I could not help her. Does that make sense?" "It makes perfect sense," Caroline said softly. "And I am very sorry about your sister. Thank you. It was a long time ago, but you never really get over losing someone you love. You just learn to live with the loss." "That is the truth," Caroline agreed. They stood together until the sun began to set, painting the sky in brilliant shades of red and gold. Wyatt walked her back to the bunkhouse and promised to have dinner sent over. That night, Caroline ate another delicious meal and went to bed feeling more at peace than she had in months. The next morning they set out for Columbus in Wyatt's wagon. The ride took about 40 minutes, and as they approached the town, Caroline felt a mix of nervousness and excitement. Columbus was small but bustling, with a main street lined with shops and businesses. There was a general store, a saloon, a church, a bank, and several other buildings. People walked along the wooden sidewalks, greeting each other and going about their business. Wyatt drove straight to a large, two-story house on the edge of town. A sign in the front yard read Henderson's boarding house. He helped Caroline down from the wagon and led her up the front steps. Mrs. Henderson answered the door on the first knock. She was a plump, cheerful woman in her 50s with rosy cheeks and kind eyes. "Wyatt, what a pleasant surprise. And who is this lovely young lady?" "This is Caroline Carter. She is new to the area, and I thought you might have a room available for her." Mrs. Henderson's eyes lit up. "Of course. Come in, come in. We can discuss all the details over tea." The interior of the boarding house was warm and inviting, with floral wallpaper and comfortable furniture. Mrs. Henderson led them to a cozy parlor and bustled off to make tea. When she returned, she was carrying a tray with a teapot, cups, and a plate of cookies. "Now then," she said, pouring the tea with a practiced hand. "Tell me about yourself, dear. Where are you from?" Caroline gave her a brief version of her story, leaving out the more painful details. Mrs. Henderson listened with genuine interest, clucking sympathetically at the appropriate moments. "You poor dear. You have been through so much. Well, you are very welcome here. I have a lovely room on the second floor with a view of the garden. The rent is reasonable and meals are included. I serve breakfast at 7, dinner at noon, and supper at 6. We have a few other boarders, all very respectable people. I run a clean, quiet house." "That sounds wonderful," Caroline said, "but I should tell you that I do not have much money. I will need to find work before I can pay you." Mrs. Henderson waved a hand dismissively. "We will work something out. I am not worried about that. In fact, I might have a solution. Have you heard that our school teacher is leaving?" Wyatt mentioned it, yes. "Well, the school board is meeting this afternoon to discuss candidates for the position. I happen to be on the board, and I can tell you that we are desperate to find someone qualified. If you are interested, I can arrange for you to meet with the other members. If they approve, you could start as soon as next week." Caroline's heart leaped. "I would be very interested. I taught school in Missouri for a year and I loved it." "Perfect. Then it is settled. You come back here at 2 o'clock and I will introduce you to the board." After they left the boarding house, Wyatt took Caroline on a tour of the town. He showed her the general store, where the owner, Mr. Patterson, greeted them warmly. He introduced her to the postmaster, the bank manager, and several other townspeople. Everyone was friendly and welcoming, and Caroline began to feel like maybe, just maybe, she could make a home here. They had lunch at a small restaurant, and over bowls of hearty stew, Wyatt told her more about Columbus. "It is a good town, full of good people. We take care of each other here. If you decide to stay, you will find that people will look out for you." "Why are you doing all of this?" Caroline asked. "You have been so kind, and I still feel like I do not understand why." Wyatt set down his spoon and looked at her seriously. "Because I see something in you, Caroline, strength and resilience. You have been through hell and you are still standing. That is rare. And I think you deserve a chance to be happy again. If I can help make that happen, then I want to." His words made Caroline's chest tighten with emotion. "Thank you," she whispered. "You have no idea how much that means to me." At 2 o'clock they returned to the boarding house, where the school board was assembled in the parlor. There were 4 members in total: Mrs. Henderson, the pastor of the local church, a wealthy rancher named Mr. Donnelly, and the town doctor, Dr. Morrison. They asked Caroline a series of questions about her education and teaching experience, and she answered them as best she could. At the end of the interview, the board members conferred quietly among themselves. Then Mrs. Henderson stood and smiled. "Miss Carter, we would be delighted to offer you the position of school teacher for Columbus. The salary is $40 a month, and you will be provided with housing at the schoolhouse if you need it. However, I am sure we can work out a better arrangement at the boarding house if you prefer." "I accept," Caroline said, barely able to contain her joy. "Thank you so much. I promise I will work hard and do my best for the children. "We have no doubt of that, dear," Mrs. Henderson said warmly. When they left the boarding house, Caroline was practically glowing. "I cannot believe it. I have a job, I have a place to live. This is more than I could have hoped for." Wyatt grinned. "I told you things would work out. Columbus is lucky to have you." They drove back to the ranch in high spirits, and that night, Wyatt insisted on celebrating. He made a special dinner of roast chicken, potatoes, and vegetables, and they ate together at the table in the main house. It was the first time Caroline had been inside, and she was struck by how homey it was. The furniture was simple but well made, and there were personal touches everywhere: a quilt draped over the back of a chair, a collection of books on a shelf, a photograph of a young woman who Caroline assumed was Lillian. After dinner, they sat on the porch and watched the stars come out. The night was warm and still, and the only sounds were the chirping of crickets and the distant howl of a coyote. "I cannot thank you enough for everything you have done," Caroline said. "You have given me hope when I thought I had none left." "You would have found your way without me," Wyatt said. "You are stronger than you think." Caroline turned to look at him. In the moonlight, his face was all planes and shadows, and she felt a flutter in her chest that had nothing to do with gratitude and everything to do with something deeper and more complicated. "Can I ask you something personal?" she said. "Of course." "Have you ever thought about getting married, starting a family?" Wyatt was quiet for a long moment. "I have thought about it. But after Lillian died, and after my parents passed a few years before that, I guess I just threw myself into the ranch. It became my whole life. I told myself I did not have time for anything else. But the truth is, I think I was scared. Scared of losing someone else I cared about." "I understand that," Caroline said. "After Thomas died, I thought I would never feel anything again. I thought my heart was closed off forever. But being here, meeting you, it has made me realize that maybe I am not as broken as I thought." "You are not broken at all," Wyatt said firmly. "You are grieving, and that is natural, but you are also healing, and that is beautiful." Their eyes met, and for a moment the air between them seemed to crackle with something unspoken. Then Wyatt cleared his throat and stood. "It is getting late. You should get some rest. You have a big week ahead of you." Caroline nodded and stood as well. As she walked back to the bunkhouse, she could feel Wyatt's eyes on her, and she wondered what he was thinking. Over the next week, Caroline prepared to start her new job. She moved into the boarding house, and Mrs. Henderson helped her get settled. The room was small but comfortable, with a bed, a dresser, a washstand, and a window that overlooked a small garden. It was the first place that had felt like hers in a long time. Wyatt visited often, bringing her supplies she needed for the schoolhouse and helping her set up the classroom. He was patient and thoughtful, always anticipating what she might need before she even asked. They spent hours together, talking and laughing, and Caroline found herself looking forward to his visits with an eagerness that surprised her. One afternoon, as they were arranging desks in the schoolhouse, Wyatt said, "You know, I have been thinking. The school board said you could live here if you wanted, but this building is pretty isolated. If you ever feel unsafe or lonely, you are always welcome to stay at the ranch. The bunkhouse is still empty." "That is very kind of you, but I think I will be all right at the boarding house. Mrs. Henderson has been wonderful, and I am enjoying getting to know the other boarders." "Good. I am glad you are settling in." He paused, then added, "But the offer stands." "Any time, for any reason." Caroline smiled. "Thank you, Wyatt. You have been such a good friend to me." The word friend felt inadequate somehow, but she did not know what else to call him. They were not courting, at least not officially, but there was something between them, something that grew stronger every time they were together. Caroline started teaching the following Monday. There were 12 students, ranging in age from 6 to 14, and they were a lively, curious bunch. She loved every minute of it, from the moment they walked in the door to the moment they left at the end of the day. Teaching gave her a sense of purpose and joy that she had been missing. Wyatt came by after school that first day to see how it had gone. She was still at her desk grading papers when he knocked on the door. "Come in," she called. He entered with a bouquet of wildflowers in his hand. "I thought you might like these. Congratulations on your first day." Caroline's heart swelled. "They are beautiful, thank you." She took the flowers and placed them in a jar of water on her desk. "The day went wonderfully. The children are delightful, and I think we are going to have a great year together." "I am glad to hear it. You deserve this, Caroline. You deserve to be happy." She walked over to him, standing close enough that she could smell the familiar scent of leather and soap. "I am happy, Wyatt, happier than I have been in a long time, and that is because of you." He looked down at her, his eyes searching her face. "Caroline, I need to tell you something. I have been trying to find the right words, but I think I just need to say it. I care about you. More than I should, probably, given that we have only known each other a few weeks. But I cannot help it. You have brought something into my life that I did not know was missing." Caroline's breath caught in her throat. "I care about you too, Wyatt. I did not think I would ever feel this way about anyone again, but I do. You make me feel alive." He reached out and gently cupped her face in his hands. "Can I kiss you?" "Yes," she whispered. The kiss was soft and sweet, a tentative exploration that quickly deepened into something more passionate. Caroline's hands found their way to Wyatt's shoulders, and she felt his arms wrap around her waist, pulling her closer. It was her first kiss since Thomas had died, and it felt like coming home and embarking on a new adventure all at once. When they finally pulled apart, they were both breathless. Wyatt rested his forehead against hers. "I have wanted to do that since the moment I met you." "I am glad you finally did," Caroline said with a smile. They stood there for a few more minutes, just holding each other, before Wyatt reluctantly stepped back. "I should let you finish your work, but I want to take you to dinner tomorrow night if you will let me. A real date." "I would love that." That night, Caroline lay in bed at the boarding house, staring at the ceiling and replaying the kiss over and over in her mind. She felt giddy and nervous and hopeful all at once. She knew it was fast, knew that some people would judge her for moving on so quickly after Thomas's death. But she also knew that Thomas would have wanted her to be happy. He had told her as much in the weeks before he died, had made her promise that she would not spend the rest of her life mourning him. The next evening, Wyatt picked her up in his wagon, looking handsome in a clean shirt and vest. He took her to the nicest restaurant in Columbus, a small place with checkered tablecloths and candles on the tables. They talked and laughed throughout the meal, and Caroline felt like she was discovering a whole new side of herself, a side that was light and carefree and in love. Yes, she was in love. She could admit that to herself now. It had happened quickly, but it was real. She loved Wyatt James with his kind heart and his easy smile and his quiet strength. After dinner, they walked through the town, hand in hand. The streets were quiet, most people having retired for the evening, and the air was cool and pleasant. "Caroline, I want to ask you something," Wyatt said as they walked. "And I want you to be honest with me, even if you think it is not what I want to hear." "All right." "Do you think you could see a future with me? I know it is soon, and I know you are still healing from losing Thomas. But I need to know if there is a chance, because if there is, I want to pursue it. I want to court you properly, with the intention of marriage eventually. But if you are not ready, or if you do not feel that way about me, I need to know so I can protect my heart." Caroline stopped walking and turned to face him. "Wyatt, I do see a future with you. I know it is fast, and I know there are people who will think it is too soon. But I also know that life is short and unpredictable. Thomas taught me that, and I do not want to waste time being scared or holding back. I love you, Wyatt. I think I have loved you since the moment you helped me dig that grave." Wyatt's face broke into a wide grin, and he picked her up and spun her around. "I love you too, Caroline. I love you so much." They kissed again, right there in the middle of the street, not caring who might see. When they finally pulled apart, Wyatt took her hand and they continued their walk, talking about the future and all the possibilities it held. Over the next few months, their relationship deepened and grew. Wyatt courted her in the old-fashioned way, bringing her flowers, taking her on picnics, and treating her with the utmost respect. He introduced her to all his friends and neighbors, and everyone could see how happy they made each other. Caroline thrived in her new life. Teaching filled her days with purpose, and Wyatt filled her evenings with love and laughter. She still thought about Thomas, of course, and there were days when the grief hit her out of nowhere. But Wyatt was patient and understanding, never making her feel guilty for her feelings. In December, on a cold but clear day, Wyatt took Caroline out to Thomas's grave. They had not been there since the day Wyatt put up the marker, and Caroline had been avoiding it, not sure she was ready to face it. But Wyatt had insisted, gently, that it was important. "You need to say a proper goodbye," he had said. "Not just to Thomas, but to that chapter of your life. You need to let yourself move forward without guilt." So they rode out to the prairie, and when they reached the grave, Caroline was relieved to see that it was still well maintained. The stone marker stood strong, and someone had placed fresh wildflowers at the base. "I came out here a few weeks ago," Wyatt admitted. "I wanted to make sure it was taken care of." Tears filled Caroline's eyes. "Thank you. That means so much to me." They stood in silence for a few minutes, and then Caroline knelt down beside the grave. "Thomas, I hope you can hear me. I hope you know that I loved you and I will always love you. You were a good husband, and I am grateful for the time we had together. But I have found someone else, someone who makes me happy and who treats me with kindness and respect. I think you would like him. I hope you would approve. I am going to move forward now, and I am going to live the life we always dreamed of, even if it is not with you. I hope you have found peace, and I hope you can find it in your heart to be happy for me." She stood, and Wyatt wrapped his arm around her shoulders. They stood there together, paying their respects, and then they walked back to the horses. "How do you feel?" Wyatt asked. "Lighter," Caroline said. "Like I just put down a weight I did not realize I was carrying." On Christmas Eve, Wyatt invited Caroline to spend the holiday at his ranch. Mrs. Henderson had closed the boarding house for the day to spend time with her family, and Caroline had been dreading spending the day alone. So she gratefully accepted Wyatt's invitation. When she arrived, she was surprised to find that he had decorated the main house with pine boughs and candles. There was a small tree in the corner, decorated with homemade ornaments and strings of popcorn. It was simple but beautiful, and it made Caroline's heart ache with happiness. They spent the day together, cooking a meal and exchanging small gifts. Caroline gave Wyatt a new leather-bound journal for keeping ranch records, and he gave her a delicate silver locket with a tiny photograph of the two of them inside. "When did you have this made?" she asked, touched. "Last week. I had a traveling photographer take our picture when we were in town, remember? I wanted you to have something to remember this time in our lives." Caroline fastened the locket around her neck and vowed never to take it off. That evening, as they sat by the fire, Wyatt took her hand. "Caroline, I know we have only been courting for a few months, but I am sure of my feelings. I want to spend the rest of my life with you. I want to wake up every morning and see your face. I want to build a family with you and grow old together. Will you marry me?" Caroline's heart soared. "Yes, Wyatt. Yes, I will marry you." He slipped a simple gold band onto her finger, and they sealed the engagement with a kiss that left them both breathless and laughing. They were married in February of 1884 in the small church in Columbus. Mrs. Henderson helped Caroline make a simple but elegant wedding dress, and the entire town turned out for the ceremony. Caroline walked down the aisle alone, as she had no family to give her away, but she did not feel alone. She felt surrounded by love and community. Wyatt stood at the altar in a new suit, looking nervous and excited. When the pastor pronounced them husband and wife, Wyatt kissed her with such tenderness and joy that Caroline thought her heart might burst. The reception was held at the boarding house, with food and music and dancing. Caroline danced with Wyatt, with Mr. Patterson from the general store, with Dr. Morrison, and with several of her students' fathers. She laughed until her sides hurt, and when she finally collapsed into a chair, Wyatt brought her a glass of punch and sat beside her. "Happy?" he asked. "Happier than I ever thought possible," she replied. They spent their wedding night at the ranch, in the main house that was now their home. Wyatt carried her over the threshold, and they made love for the first time with a tenderness and passion that left them both in tears. In the months that followed, they settled into married life with ease. Caroline continued teaching, and Wyatt ran the ranch. They worked together in the evenings, preparing lessons and tending to ranch business side by side. They talked about everything and nothing, and they laughed more than Caroline had ever thought possible. In the fall of 1884, Caroline discovered she was pregnant. She told Wyatt over dinner one evening, watching nervously as he processed the news. For a moment he just stared at her, and then he let out a whoop of joy and picked her up, spinning her around. "We are going to be parents. Caroline, this is the best news I have ever received. Are you sure? I know we did not plan this so soon. I am positive. I cannot wait to meet our baby." Caroline gave birth to a healthy baby boy in May of 1885. They named him Samuel James, after Wyatt's father, and he had his mother's dark hair and his father's whiskey-colored eyes. Wyatt was a devoted father, often waking in the night to help with feedings and diaper changes. He would sit in the rocking chair with Samuel cradled in his arms, singing soft lullabies that made Caroline's heart melt. Caroline took a break from teaching to care for Samuel, but she knew she would return eventually. For now, though, she was content to be a mother and a wife, to enjoy this precious time with her growing family. 2 years later, they welcomed a daughter, Grace, who had Wyatt's smile and Caroline's green eyes. And 2 years after that, another son, Daniel, who was the spitting image of his older brother. The ranch prospered under Wyatt's careful management, and Caroline's reputation as an excellent teacher meant that families moved to Columbus specifically so their children could attend her school. The town grew and thrived, and the James family was at the heart of it all. On a warm evening in the summer of 1892, Caroline sat on the porch of their home, watching her children play in the yard. Samuel was 7 now, tall and strong like his father. Grace was 5, with a sweet disposition and a love of animals, and Daniel was 3, full of energy and mischief. Wyatt came out and sat beside her, handing her a glass of lemonade. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "I'm thinking about how far I have come. 9 years ago I was digging a grave in the prairie, alone and terrified, and now look at me. I have a husband I adore, 3 beautiful children, a home, a career, a community. It is more than I ever dreamed possible." Wyatt took her hand. "You have made my life complete, Caroline. I thank God every day that I found you out there on the prairie." "I think we found each other," Caroline said softly, "and I will be forever grateful that you stopped and offered to help. You gave me a second chance at happiness." They sat together in comfortable silence, watching the sun set over the Texas prairie. The children's laughter filled the air, and Caroline felt a profound sense of peace and contentment. Her life had not turned out the way she had planned, but it had turned out exactly the way it was meant to. She thought about Thomas sometimes, usually on quiet evenings like this. She hoped he was at peace, and she believed he was watching over them, happy that she had found love again. She wore the locket Wyatt had given her all those years ago, and sometimes she would open it and look at the photograph inside, marveling at how young and hopeful they had looked. But her past, while a part of her, did not define her. She was Caroline James now, wife and mother and teacher and friend. She had built a life filled with love and purpose, and she was grateful for every single moment. As the years passed, the James family continued to grow and flourish. Samuel went on to help his father run the ranch, proving to be a natural cattleman with a good head for business. Grace became a teacher like her mother, taking over the school when Caroline finally retired at the age of 45. And Daniel, ever the adventurous one, became a horse trainer, earning a reputation throughout Texas for his skill and patience. Caroline and Wyatt grew old together, their love deepening with each passing year. They celebrated anniversaries and birthdays, watched their children marry and have children of their own, and built a legacy that would last for generations. In the evenings, they would sit on the porch as they always had, holding hands and watching the sun set. They would reminisce about the early days, about that first meeting on the prairie and the journey that had brought them together. "Do you ever regret it?" Wyatt asked one evening when they were both in their 60s. "Do you ever wish things had turned out differently?" Caroline looked at him, at the lines around his eyes and the gray in his hair, and she felt a rush of love so strong it took her breath away. "Not for a single moment. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Wyatt James. You saved me in every way a person can be saved." "You saved me too," Wyatt said. "I was just existing before you came along. You taught me how to live." They kissed, a soft, gentle kiss that spoke of a lifetime of love and commitment. On a crisp autumn day in 1910, Caroline and Wyatt celebrated their 50th wedding anniversary. The entire town of Columbus turned out for the party, which was held at the ranch. There were tables laden with food, music, and dancing, and toasts that brought tears to everyone's eyes. Their children and grandchildren gathered around them, and Caroline looked at each face, seeing pieces of herself and Wyatt reflected in each one. She thought about the woman she had been when she first arrived in Columbus, broken and grieving and lost. And she looked at the woman she had become, strong and loved and whole. "What a life we have had," she whispered to Wyatt as they danced together, moving slowly to the music. "What a life indeed," he agreed, "and I would not change a single thing." As the party wound down and the guests began to leave, Caroline and Wyatt stood on the porch, waving goodbye. The sun was setting, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink, and Caroline felt a profound sense of gratitude for the journey that had brought her here. She had come to Columbus to bury her husband, expecting to leave as soon as the task was done. But a kind cowboy had stopped to help her, and in doing so, had given her a reason to stay. He had shown her that it was possible to love again, to build a new life from the ashes of the old. And together, they had created something beautiful and lasting. The years continued to pass, gentle and full. Wyatt and Caroline remained active and engaged well into their 70s, still attending church every Sunday, still hosting Sunday dinners for their ever-growing family, still taking evening walks around the ranch. On a peaceful evening in the spring of 1915, they sat together on the porch as they had done thousands of times before. Caroline was now 66 years old, and Wyatt was 70. Their bodies were slower and their hair was white, but their love burned as bright as ever. "I have been thinking," Caroline said, resting her head on Wyatt's shoulder, "about that day you found me on the prairie, What if you had ridden a different direction that day? What if you had decided not to stop? But I did stop, Wyatt said, kissing the top of her head. And I would have stopped no matter what direction I was riding. I think we were meant to find each other, Caroline. I think it was always going to happen. I like to think so too, Caroline said. I like to think that even in my darkest moment, love was waiting for me just over the horizon. They sat together until the stars came out, talking softly about their children and grandchildren, about the ranch and the town, about all the memories they had made together. When the night air grew too cool, they went inside, hand in hand, just as they had done for over 30 years. Caroline lived to be 78 years old, passing peacefully in her sleep in 1927. Wyatt held her hand as she took her last breath, and though his heart was broken, he was grateful for every moment they had shared. He buried her in the cemetery in Columbus, not far from where Thomas Carter lay. The marker read Caroline James, beloved wife, mother, and teacher. She chose love and built a legacy. Wyatt lived another 3 years, cared for by his children and surrounded by love. When he passed in 1930 at the age of 85, he was laid to rest beside Caroline, just as he had always wanted. Their graves sat side by side, 2 lives intertwined for eternity. The James family continued to thrive in Columbus, with children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren carrying on the legacy that Caroline and Wyatt had built. The ranch remained in the family, passed down through the generations, and the town never forgot the kind cowboy who had helped a grieving widow and the woman who had chosen to stay and build a life. In the end, their story was one of hope and resilience, of the power of kindness and the enduring nature of love. Caroline had come to Texas to bury her past, but instead she had found her future. And in finding it, she had discovered that even in the darkest times, there is always the possibility of light, always the chance for a new beginning. Their love story became the stuff of local legend, told and retold by generations of Columbus residents. Parents would point out the James Ranch to their children and tell them about the widow who arrived alone to bury her husband and the cowboy who helped her and asked her to stay. They would talk about how Caroline and Wyatt built a life together based on mutual respect, deep love, and unwavering commitment. The schoolhouse where Caroline taught still stood, though it had been expanded and modernized over the years. A plaque hung in the entrance hall, commemorating Caroline James as one of the founding educators of Columbus, crediting her with shaping the minds of countless children and contributing immeasurably to the growth and character of the community. The ranch that Wyatt had worked so hard to build remained one of the most successful in the county, a testament to his skill and dedication. But more than that, it stood as a symbol of what could be built when 2 people came together with love and determination. On summer evenings, if you walked past the old ranch house, some folks swore you could still feel the presence of Caroline and Wyatt, could almost see them sitting on the porch as they had done for so many years, watching the sunset and holding hands. It was a comforting thought, the idea that their love was so strong it had imprinted itself on the very land they had called home. Their story lived on in other ways too. Grace, their daughter, wrote a book about her parents' lives, which became required reading in the local schools. In it, she wrote about the strength it took for her mother to keep going after losing her first husband, about the kindness her father had shown to a stranger in need, and about the beautiful life they had built together. The book ended with a quote that Caroline had often said to her children. "Love is not about forgetting the past or ignoring the pain. It is about having the courage to open your heart again, to believe that there is still beauty and joy to be found in this world." The James family reunion, held every year in July at the ranch, drew hundreds of descendants from all over Texas and beyond. They would gather under the same Texas sky that Caroline and Wyatt had loved, sharing stories and memories, keeping the legacy alive. And in the town cemetery, the graves of Caroline and Wyatt James remained a popular spot for visitors. Young couples would often stop there, reading the inscriptions and marveling at the dates. 50 years of marriage, carved right there in stone. People would leave flowers, particularly wildflowers, the kind Wyatt had brought Caroline after her first day of teaching. Not far away, Thomas Carter's grave also remained well maintained, tended by the James family as a show of respect for the man whose death had inadvertently brought Caroline to Columbus and, eventually, to Wyatt. It was a small gesture, but it spoke to the grace and understanding that had characterized Caroline's life. She had never forgotten Thomas, never dishonored his memory. She had simply chosen to live again, to love again, and in doing so, she had created something truly remarkable. The story of Caroline Carter and Wyatt James became more than just a local tale. It became a reminder that life could surprise you, that in your darkest hour, hope could appear in unexpected forms. It became a testament to the idea that it was never too late to start over, never too late to find happiness, and that sometimes the most beautiful chapters of our lives are the ones we never saw coming. Their descendants continued to embody the values Caroline and Wyatt had instilled, values of hard work, compassion, integrity, and love. The James name became synonymous with community service and generosity. When people needed help, they knew they could count on the James family, just as Caroline had been able to count on Wyatt all those years ago. As the decades rolled on and the 20th century progressed, the world changed dramatically. But in Columbus, Texas, the story of the widow and the cowboy remained constant, a touchstone of simpler times and enduring values. It was a story about the best of what people could be, about the kindness of strangers and the transformative power of love. And so, in the way of all great love stories, Caroline and Wyatt's legacy lived on, not just in the family they created or the land they tended, but in the hearts and minds of everyone who heard their story and found in it a reason to believe in second chances, in kindness, and in the enduring power of love. The ranch house eventually became a historical landmark, preserved by the family and open to visitors several times a year. People would walk through the rooms where Caroline and Wyatt had lived, raised their children, and grown old together. They would see the rocking chair where Wyatt had sung lullabies to baby Samuel, the kitchen table where countless family meals had been shared, the bedroom where Caroline had taken her last breath with Wyatt holding her hand. In the barn, the stall where Clover, the dappled gray mare Caroline had loved to ride, once lived was marked with a small plaque. The corral where their children had learned to ride still stood, its weathered wood a testament to the passage of time and the permanence of memory. The wildflowers that grew on the prairie, the same kind Wyatt had picked for Caroline, continued to bloom each spring, painting the landscape in brilliant colors. Local children still picked them for their mothers, often hearing the story of how a cowboy once picked flowers for a grieving widow and won her heart. Everything came full circle, as the best stories do. The grief Caroline had carried to Columbus had transformed into joy. The loneliness Wyatt had felt after losing his sister had been filled by love. The small kindness of helping a stranger dig a grave had blossomed into a lifetime of happiness, and a legacy that would endure for generations. And there, in the heart of Texas, under the vast blue sky and the endless prairie, the story of Caroline and Wyatt remained alive, a beacon of hope and a reminder that even in our darkest moments, Love can find us if we are brave enough to let it in.